Anna Ogier-Bloomer is a feminist artist and photographer. She was born in Hartford, Connecticut, raised in Cincinnati, and now lives in Brooklyn. One of her roommates is, her husband is a recent graduate of MFA Fine Arts, Delano Dunn. So she's part of our extended family. Through her work, Anna explores issues of maternity, not modernity, but maternity, family, femininity, and womanhood. Her widely published photographs confront the complexity of the seemingly contradictory states of being a working mother. Her photos have been featured extensively online, including Future Shot, Refinery 29, Huffington Post, the Daily Mail, and Redbook, among others. She's received grants from the Awesome Foundation, Chashama and CSArts Cincinnati. Anna recently concluded a feminist residency at Project for Empty Space in Newark, New Jersey, which is run by our very own Jasmine Wahi, where she participated in a panel called Grab Back, Taking Back Power Through Art. Anna has an MFA in photography and related media from Parsons and a BFA from the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. This year, I'm very pleased to say, she has joined the faculty of the MFA Fine Arts program here at SVA. Please join me in welcoming Anna Ogier-Bloomer.
Most of you know me in a different capacity as a counselor and educator, so I'm thrilled to have the chance to give you a little insight into my own practice and talk a little bit about the challenges of making art and throughout life. So I want to start with this image here. I am number 9. This was taken my first semester in my BFA program, and this teacher ended up being a really important mentor in my life, but he was a pretty famous dude, and he was like, I'm not gonna remember your name, so let's just, everyone gets a number. So he shot a Polaroid and labeled us, and he called us these numbers for many weeks. And he was there was something endearing about him, so we didn't fault him for it. But I just like to show that image. And this is an image of him on the left with 2 other photographers. His name is Bill Burke, and he embarked on this documentary project about Kentucky. And this photo that he shared with me very early in my career was inspiring to me, and I felt like this is what I want to do. I want to go out and make photographs about people in real places, and just spend months traveling and just making images of real life. So I never actually got to go and do that, but I did embark on a sort of domestic photography career because real life is what interests me most, and kind of capturing that. This is a still from Pull My Daisy, which is a film by Robert Frank. It has Allen Ginsberg in it, some other folks, Jack Kerouac narrates, and it's kind of a really kooky, crazy art film that was made in the 50s, and there was something about that, just documentation of a family in New York City that was inspiring. So I wanted to show you guys a few things that kind of led me to where I ended up. William Eggleston's 2 1/4 book. So within photography, books are a pretty critical format. And this image in particular in this book, his square images, led me to my square path, which you'll see soon. And then this image by Sally Mann, The Perfect Tomato. Really controversial image, which I'm sure most of you are aware of her daughter. She's most well known for photographing her children, but just this, this raw honesty of documenting one's own family was really moving for me. So this is a Polaroid of my mother when she was about 19 years old. And I think that this informed my work in a lot of ways. And this is a Polaroid of my family when we were young. I'm the baby in the man's lap. All the children are nude. The 80s were a good time. And I think that this is very much a direct reflection of where I ended up later with my photography. So Family Pictures is the series that came out of my undergraduate career. I began making these images in my first semester there. This was taken my second semester of college. And to me, it's still a really important image. I still exhibit these works. This is my mother with beer and merit ultralights, and I feel like there are certain signifiers in this image that hint at class, a certain socioeconomic class, a certain place. Just the type of house in the background tells you a lot about where this image was taken, even the style of the glass, the type of cigarettes she's smoking. We learn so much about people just through these very small, seemingly small details. So those things really intrigue me. And I realized that I had a story to tell about my own family that was important. That's my mother and my grandmother. So again, these small details of space without showing you too much, just the wallpaper, the molding on the wall, the style of the shirt that she's wearing gives you a lot of information about what kind of people these are. And I felt like I had to make work about what I knew. I'm very interested in people's real life stories. I love to learn about people's families. If I'm looking at photographs and I learn that that's actually a photograph of the photographer's own family or relatives, then I'm that much more interested and drawn in because I like to know about people's lives. And I think that's very much a human nature kind of quality, that we're interested in each other. There's sort of a voyeurism in that. There's a desire to know about others. And there's sort of a comfort, too, in learning about other people's struggles, I think. This is when my great-grandmother was in hospice, so this image is 5 generations of women in one room. And this is my great-grandmother in hospice in Cincinnati, looking at a compact to check her makeup. She died a few days later. But her looks were very important to her. And this is Bess and Charles at Grandma's funeral, Toledo, Ohio. So my cousins, who are twins and both have Asperger's syndrome, I was able to make pictures of including them and sort of bring them into the fold. And again, the space to me is such a strange space. This type of service, AstroTurf and a giant cross and painted brick. So we really start to kind of get a picture of this space and environment. And this is my brother and sister at the YMCA in Toledo, where my father learned to swim. And I really admire my sister's confidence. It's something that's always inspired me, that she's always been very free to be herself. And as a woman, that was always really inspiring. Even as a young woman, I think she inwardly struggled with confidence, but outwardly she was very much herself. And so this is her a few years later with a homemade hula hoop. So my photographs get at intimacy and domestic relationships and stories over time. I'm interested in looking at people over the years. This is my brother several years later with his son. This is the first time I met my brother's son. And place is important, so the titles generally include the city and state as well. I'm not going to repeat Cincinnati, Ohio for most of you tonight, but that's usually included in the text. This is Aunt Sue threw a Father's Day picnic. And I'm very lucky that they've let me in to their lives, and most of my family is extremely supportive of the images. Only one person has said he doesn't want to be photographed, and I haven't photographed him. It's not around anyway, but for the most part, they're very supportive. And this is something that I do with them. It's really important to me that they understand what I'm making pictures about, where the pictures are going to end up, what they look like at the end of the day. I get all of them approved by them. I'm not a photojournalist, so it's not, there's no kind of like ethical conflict there. It's really important to me that they are comfortable with being participants in the work. So that's my brother's son. And this is Grandma Often Felt Lonely. People have questions too throughout, like feel free to jump in. This is Teaching Me to Shoot in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. This is my grandfather, who owns a lot of guns, like most of the people in my family. And this is called Family Meeting After Dad Told Us. So The images started to kind of take a turn when my father revealed that, well, didn't intentionally reveal, but it was revealed that he'd been having affairs for many years, which threw everything in the family dynamic off quite a bit. And so then the pictures made after that point are all kind of either about that directly or through that lens. This is called After Dad Moved Out. He still came to visit and help out around the house. So he and my mother are lying together. This is Dad weeding. And Sarah doing Mom's toenails. So for a long time I was shooting these squares with medium format film. If anyone does photography, they know what I'm talking about. It's a little more involved than shooting 35 millimeter, a little bit more kind of care and time goes into it, and you get a lot fewer shots. It's about as far from digital as you can get without doing a view camera, like Ansel Adams style. And I loved that action of taking time to compose just one image and holding this kind of contraption that felt like it had a history to it. It's very manual. You're really engaged with the mechanics of this device, and I enjoyed that. And I used to print in the darkroom, and I really miss being able to do that. But you'll see kind of next how that became too difficult for me to sort of manage on a daily basis. This is when my mother moved to Santa Barbara after the falling out with my father. And this is called Argument Over the Divorce between my father and myself.
How long ago was this?
This picture?
Yeah.
This one was 2013? No, 2011. Yeah, 2011, because I did not have a kid. There's before kid and after kid in life. And this was shot the same week, Mom taking a break from lunch at my brother's house, Price Hill, Cincinnati. So this is an image where the location tells you more about, if you know Cincinnati, you know Price Hill, and the kind of neighborhood. And you can kind of discern the situation from the exterior of the house a little bit as well. But this is just one of my favorite photos of my mother, or anywhere ever, because she insisted on wearing this fur coat that she'd gotten from her mother-in-law, which clearly did not fit properly, is a ridiculous thing to wear in general, unless you're on the Upper East Side, but certainly in Price Hill, Cincinnati, it's ridiculous. But it was really important to her that she wear this thing.
Not in Indian Hill, though.
No, not in Indian Hill, that's true. This is called Grandpa Had a Cold the first time he met my daughter. So he wore this mask. I did not ask him to do that. I thought it was totally bizarre and unnecessary, but I appreciated it. But that's the interaction right there. So that's the image of him meeting her. Is from a distance, hands in pockets. Okay, there it is. And so my hope is that you can learn about our relationship through this and his relationship with her and with kids. This is called co-sleeping, which if you're involved in the parenting world is going to be somewhat controversial. This is called Socializing Happened at the Pool in Indian Creek Apartments in Cincinnati. So my mother kind of jumped around, lived in different places, and this is one of the apartment complexes where she lived. And that pool area was like, stuff was going on for those folks there. That was the place to be. But I'm interested in, how women age, women's, the perception of women over time, how they cope with aging and the pressures of beauty. And it's my mother and the women of her age group feel this very, very strongly. She's one of the few in her group of friends of, say, 20 women to not have some kind of plastic surgery at this point. And they're not wealthy people. Like, these are definitely middle class to lower, upper middle class in the Midwest. And I was surprised to see the prevalence of plastic surgery or Botox within her community. So the pressure is there, and so I'm interested in kind of following her through this as well. And this is called When They Painted. They put all Grandma's pictures back just as they were. So this wall of photos in my grandmother's house was like this forever, exactly this formation. She added a couple pictures as there were some kids born, but pretty much that was it for many, many years. I now have all these because my grandfather decided he just wanted 2 of those images and he took the rest down and put them in the trash. So I have them and I'm hoping to do something with them. So the next thing that I did, I'm always making the family pictures, and that was a tiny glimpse of, I mean, there's probably hundreds of images. But then I met my husband, and we went to Los Angeles, and he grew up in South Central LA, which most of you probably know is a part of town that has gone through very serious, what's the word, upheaval, riots in the 90s. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Rodney King, please go look it up and read about it. His family is wonderful. What's that? Uprising. Well, I don't know. He probably wouldn't call it that, but folks who didn't live through it do think of it that way. So I think that's an interesting conversation. But anyway, his family welcomed me in, and I got permission to take pictures as well. And my intention was to make the same kinds of pictures that I would about my own family, about these folks who were now also my family. So this is my mother-in-law and her sister live in neighboring houses. After I took this picture, they got the fence fixed for my next visit, because they said Anna's going to come and photograph the fence, so they put up a new fence. I felt bad about that. My husband, his brother, their half-sister, their mother, their aunt, and their grandfather in Los Angeles. So there's an old picture of Delano right there on the left. And what I love about this image is that the kitchen reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen in many ways. And this is his grandfather's house, where they've lived since he bought it in the early 50s for $500. And I think there are these similarities of aesthetics that translate from there to kind of this country family of mine in the Midwest. Because my grandmother and grandfather are from Kentucky and Indiana, and there's definitely kind of a country feel to these folks. So I like seeing these kinds of similarities. This is called Our Nieces Ride Bikes from Their House to the Neighbors and Back. They're not allowed to go further. So it was definitely a learning experience for me that to go riding bikes with the girls meant riding in a circle on the sidewalk from one house to the next. It's just not a life that I've experienced. This is called Mabel with a Lollipop. She died 3 weeks after a visit. This is my husband's grandmother, who I had the pleasure of meeting, just before she passed away from dementia complications. This is called My Mother-in-Law Decorated for Christmas early for our visit in November, which I can appreciate because I love to decorate for holidays. And I was showing this image a few years ago in a crit group, and someone said to me, they accused me of deliberately not photographing the nicest part of the house, as they put it, and that I was somehow like making a choice to represent them in a negative light. And I corrected her and said that this is one of the nicest parts of the house, where they take great pride in, the decor. And so I thought it was really indicative of her own judgment about others and about another space. But I think these look just like the pictures of my own family, but just with different people. This is called Chuck Dancing at Mabel's Memorial South Los Angeles Sports Center. And this is Chuck's TV repair shop, is now a barber shop he rents out. Fascinating guy. He owns 2 commercial spaces in South Central LA, and one is now a barber shop that he kind of maintains. And this is called, and Mabel's Candy Store is a salon. So his wife, former wife, passed away. She owned this candy store that was right next to the TV repair shop. And in this image, I took a bunch of pictures of the salon, of what's actually happening there, but that was a lot less interesting to me than this kind of detail that's unexpected, where you learn a little bit more about the place, and these little details. Okay, so jumping to another series. I've been doing the family pictures for so long, I thought that's all I could do, and then I went to grad school, yay, MFA. And it showed me that I could do other things, which was really important. I loved what I was doing, but it did feel a little bit like, can I do something else? So for this series, I continued family pictures throughout, but in this series, I looked at the books that my mother had given me over the years, and I talked to her then about why she gave them to me. So this is one of the first ones that I have that she gave to me when I was in 7th grade. So it's a scan of the physical book itself, not like an Amazon cover image or JPEG or something, and paired with the text from our interviews. So this one says, everybody's responsible for their own sexuality, and knowledge is power. I was first introduced to this book early in the feminist revolution. I was drawn to feminism after growing up in a paternalistic family and society. Like I was told I couldn't fly jets because women's reflexes are slower than men's. This book was part of the revolution. I wanted my daughters to know their bodies and not believe that social and cultural misinformation. So if you can believe it, I actually used this to learn about puberty and stuff when I was 13. It still was accurate, even though it was many decades old. It's a great book. So this is just 5 images from a larger series, but The Feminine Mystique, which is a big one many of you have probably already read. I remember it was a very good book, and it was a wardrobe basic, but nothing specific sticks with me. After a while, a lot of the theories ran together until I got to gynecology, which kind of annoyed me, and probably stopped reading feminist theory after that for a while. And I think that gets to it, at just how we change over time. We can be very invested in something at one point in our lives, and as time goes on, our priorities shift. Maybe the lens through which we're reading these things or viewing these things or viewing the world shifts, for better or worse. This is gynecology. By then I was in a feminist reading and writing group in Hartford. That gynecology was a pain in the ass to read. She's one of the extremist feminists. Then we started reading poetry too. It was my first book club. I took it through the University of Hartford. At the time I had Cameron and you were on the way, so I had a lot of distractions. And when she told me this, and I didn't know this, I really admired her even more because she didn't go to college. She went to a nursing school. She's never graduated from college, but she's reading some really heavy stuff while she's at home with 2 young kids and a husband who was probably gone 20 hours a day in a new place. So that was just, I learned more about her female experience through doing this project. And then later she gave me books like this, which you would think are in total contrast to the previous text, right? And those other ones, she gave me gynecology in college, when I was in college, and this she gave to me in recent years when she started to go through these issues in her life. So I was interested in coping mechanisms and how our priorities shift when we're going through trauma or dealing with trauma. This is pop culture's attempt to facilitate relationships. I'm in the middle of a relationship disaster. It's been devastating. Because of the crisis in my marriage, one of my girlfriends is always telling me that we need to manipulate relationships, and she suggested this book, which uses pop culture to reach people. I've had much more serious serious self-help books. Men want to feel the way like they are men, and for a lot of men, that means protecting and providing. That's something he says in this book. I didn't read it. Have to confess. I feel a little bit bad about that. And if you watch Sex and the City, you remember this book. No hands from, such a lie, thank you. Come on, yes. He's just not that into you. And all she had to say about it was, I'm sorry I gave you this book, but it this is not edited. This is everything she said. I just put it down on digital paper, so to speak. But it was just about protecting you and giving you the tools to protect yourself. You can't protect yourself from everything, that's for sure. And she so badly wanted to protect her children and her daughters especially from what has happened to her. She still does, but she hasn't given me a book in a while. Now I give her books, and that's kind of the pivot of life when child and parent shift roles, which is a good kind of segue into my next project, Let Down, which is where I made images about my relationship with my new daughter, my first child. And this was such a fun day. I was at the Whitney Biennial on the press preview day, because my husband used to work there, so I would get in when no one else could be there, and I'm walking around with all the important folks from the press before anyone else has seen the biennial. And I've got my daughter strapped to me, and this woman, very serious, and she looks, like she's legit press, comes up and she's like, "This is your art?" And gestures at my daughter, and I was like, "No, but that's awesome." What a good idea. If I'd known it was that easy, I could just show up and walk around with my baby all the time. So that was kind of the first moment that was like, oh, my kid could be art. Even though I'd studied family photographers, domestic photographers for so many years, and I love looking at pictures of people's kids, not artistic photos of people's kids, like Sally Mann, not just anyone's pictures of kids. So this was really hard, and I know that probably doesn't make sense to those of you who don't have kids, but it was really difficult to make a picture with a newborn. And my daughter was a difficult baby, cried a lot, couldn't be put down. I couldn't really go to the bathroom, meaning like I couldn't pee, not just like go, but I couldn't like sit on the toilet without her screaming if I'd put her down for like 3 seconds. So it was really hard for me to shoot medium format, which I was, accustomed to. So I started just using my phone or my digital camera, whatever I could kind of grab in the moment. And you don't sleep, and people always say you don't sleep, but like it's really true that you don't sleep for days and days. So this was really difficult, but I managed to make some images along the way in the first year that I felt captured kind of the difficulty of it and also the physical sort of implications of motherhood in particular. This is scratches from breastfeeding at 9 months, so it's very common for them to kind of claw at the skin and want to like grab at it. It's soothing and comforting. And so she'd be nursing and have one arm free, and she'd just go at it. And their little nails are so sharp. The phenomenon. It's like, so this is how I would look after like nursing for a few minutes. And this is nursing and peeing, which I was doing, and this happened a lot. So like if I was naked, she wanted to breastfeed. And I can't blame her because it seems like it must be awesome. So I want to read just a little bit from this book called Mother Reader, put together by the artist Moira Davey. It's a really good book if you're interested in learning more about the mother experience for artists and writers and creative individuals. So Adrienne Rich is a poet, and she wrote about becoming a new mother. And I think that I'm not a writer, so I think that she puts it very well. Nothing, to be sure, had prepared me for the intensity of a relationship already existing between me and a creature I'd carried in my body and now held in my arms and fed from my breasts. No one mentions the psychic crisis of bearing a first child, the excitation of long-buried feelings about one's own mother, the sense of confused power and powerlessness of being taken over on the one hand and of touching new physical and psychic potentialities on the other, a heightened sensibility which can be exhilarating, bewildering, and exhausting. No one mentions the strangeness of attraction, which can be as single-minded and overwhelming as the early days of a love affair, to be so tiny, so dependent, so folded into itself, who is and yet is not part of oneself. And then just jumping ahead. The act of suckling a child, like a sexual act, may be tense, physically painful, charged with cultural feelings of inadequacy or guilt, or like a sexual act can be physically delicious, elementally soothing experience filled with a tender sensuality. And that really is what breastfeeding is like, and so I called this letdown because that's the moment when the milk comes through the breast and is able to be consumed by the baby. And it is weird. It's a weird feeling that is painful and pleasurable at the same time. And that's kind of what this project was about. I think parenting is like that. Motherhood is like that. This is called engorged, which is very common. If you don't release the milk for a period of time, then it gets built up like this, and it's extremely painful, extremely painful. This is called splayed. And this is evening feeding with Dad. So this is sort of the other side of it. This is how my husband would feed her, which seems a lot easier, right? In some ways. Getting sick at my mother's. So again, this is about kind of the physical implications of motherhood. When you're sick and you just can't hold your kid. Violet, hot, removing her pants. And I'm gonna jump back to this one for a minute because I know you all wanted to keep looking at me going to the bathroom. This image in particular kind of made the rounds on the internet really quickly and surprisingly. And it was great. There was a lot of interest and a lot of positive response from folks, but also some really disgusting negative responses to this work. And that was surprising. There were a lot of racist comments about my family, referring to my daughter as the N-word, which is just the beginning of this in her life, I know. But that was something that I didn't expect. And it's weird to watch yourself being talked about on the internet. Like, I'm in Facebook and I follow certain groups, and I can watch them post about me and then talk about me. Like, they don't know I'm a member of the group, you know. They're just talking about this work and arguing about whether or not it's acceptable, if it's good, if I'm a good mother, if I'm a bad mother. The point where I was like, I have to shut this off, I'm gonna stop looking, was when someone said that the toilet paper roll here was too far from the toilet. and too far for what I don't know. Like, were they implying that like I must have staged it because like that doesn't make sense, or just like poor bathroom design? I really don't know. But people got so irate about a lot of parts of this work. So that's changed how we post images of our daughter. I share the artwork, but we don't share social media images of our child anymore. And I still have, I have kind of misgivings about sharing her image online or anywhere. I mean, when I graduated from undergrad, this wasn't an issue. Like, people barely had websites. So people would see your work, but it didn't have this kind of reach that it has now that we have to worry about. So this gets to my latest series, A Family of Women. And I made this work all this year. It's all made through video chats with my mother and sister and daughter. And I had hoped to travel to Cincinnati and photograph them as they both go through divorces together. My sister recently moved in with my mother as she's getting divorced. She's 31. They've been together for 16 years. So it was a very big change in her life. And due to many reasons, I wasn't able to travel. And so we ended up communicating, a lot via video chat, FaceTime, and Skype, and something I do with my daughter too when I'm traveling. And it's a way of connecting, I think, and staying connected on a more intimate level than we've been able to in the past. But what emerged was sort of like this look at matriarchal bonds, women in the home, our relationships with each other, how we maintain those bonds, and how women kind of process, again, trauma that they're going through. And I really enjoyed working with this particular medium because it's the opposite of what I'd been doing before, where you make a beautiful image with film, and it's, you know, very fine grain, and you take it very, very, very seriously. And many of these images are highly pixelated, which I appreciate, and kind of gets into an almost painterly quality, like in this image, where details are lost and things are abstracted, and I think they can be quite beautiful. So for each of these, I would play around with the inset image, and some of them I've removed them, some of them I changed them. I did Photoshop these a little bit. I took liberties that I wouldn't normally take with my other documentary style images. And that was really fun too. Like, I was able to shed some things that I'd been holding on to. I went to hear Sally Mann speak when I was struggling with my newborn and making art and all of this stuff. And I got to ask her the question of, like, what should I do as a parent trying to make art and deal with these things? And she said, if I was doing it over again, if I was shooting my family now, I would be shooting digital. She shot 8x10 in a river. I mean, you can't get more elaborate and gorgeous than what she was doing. But I was like, oh my gosh, if Sally Mann says that I can shoot digital, I can shoot digital. I can really do it. So she says it's okay. And as silly as it is to need permission from others, I commend all of you who don't feel that kind of like struggle. It was very meaningful to me, and it was the permission that I needed to kind of break out of my box and my constraints of what made a photograph, what made art. And so this for me was taken even in a step further. And there's a lot of phone photography out there. Yeah. Yes, that's a good question. I think for photographers in particular, the final output, the printing, is critical, or whatever that final output's going to be, because it's not like making a sculpture or a painting where the object already exists. So we make these pictures and don't get to fully realize it until you make the print, and I think mount and frame it, or however you're going to realize it in its final state. And a lot of photographers don't get to do that, or choose not to do that. They're just shooting all the time. And now with things just existing online, there's less chance for that. So printing is critical for me, and it's not meant to be like a digital file in its final state. So I print the family pictures, 24x30, editions of 3, with a white border around them. And I was doing digital C prints, which is the closest thing to a darkroom that you can get these days. Since darkroom printing is pretty hard to come by. It's still possible, but it's pretty tough. But these are inkjet pigment prints. And it does fall apart. I mean, the pixels are there, but the print resolution is high. So if you see pixels, that's intentional. Like that's exactly what I want you to see. And on paper, it looks the way it does on screen. So this is my sister in Chicago. And again, I get permission for everything. Not interested in a gotcha moment or making the women in my family uncomfortable. It's really important to me that they do feel comfortable and feel like participants. So my sister would actually like text me and say, oh, hey, I'm doing this thing, do you want to talk? Which was great. That's great. This is a photograph of my daughter. And this is one that actually I'm really on the fence about right now, about even including, because I don't know if I want it to go around the internet. It's not on my website right now, it's not published online. So you are getting a sneak peek. But I am really kind of considering these other things now. So this is my mother waiting for a blind date. And again, some of these insets were real time, real to the moment, the small image in the corner. And some of them I've composited in a new one, or cropped down a different one and composited that in. So it's entirely my choice later, just kind of what works, I think, conceptually and aesthetically. And this is when she called me on her way home after being stood up by the blind date. Don't pay for a dating service, guys. Don't. You all know, use the apps. And then this is, we're on the phone together with the dating service. I'm glad you can laugh about it, because I was really upset and emotionally invested in her emotional state and helping her. But you're right, we should laugh about it, and she can laugh about it now. But this is also gets at that the role pivot that happens between parent and child when you reach a certain age, and many of you are nodding, you understand. Some people that happens a lot earlier. For some of us that happens much later, but it definitely, you get to the point where you're helping your parent more than they help you emotionally, or whatever. So I travel for work. I'm the full-time employed person in our house. So I would call in to connect with my daughter, which is the only way that we could sometimes. And that's called Tears. It's my sister. And that's my sister's marriage license. So this was one of those moments when she texted me at 6:30 because she knew I would be up. She's never up at that. She gets up at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon and said, "I'm in the basement. Do you want to call me?" And I was like, what? You're in the basement? So she was in my mother's basement going through all of her belongings after moving out from her, home with her husband. So she showed me the marriage license, which has my husband's name on it because he officiated their wedding. So it's another kind of like layer of this familial bond, but break, All his weddings have ended in divorce, by the way, so don't ask Delano to marry you, okay? This is her moving around the basement, kind of moving things around. She slept down there on an air mattress for a little while. So women searching for their new identity after being attached to this person and associated with this person for many, many years. My mother's case, 35, 40 years of her life. My sister, the majority of her life, certainly her entire adult life, and how we kind of get through that and move on to the next thing. So she's showing me these images, and I like the kind of meta image that emerges through this medium as well, because we might have images in the background. She's showing me something. We've got the inset, so that's that moment where I'm existing simultaneously with her. That's my daughter mad at me. And this is my mother on her porch. And she knew what I was doing and that we're taking pictures, that we're talking in order to make photographs together. That's the idea. It's fully realized by both of us. So she's moving around the space and she places the computer here. And you can see yourself, right? So she knows that this is the image we're making. And I love that. I love that she's like, let's do this now. This is how I'm feeling. Like, this is the perspective. My husband was like, don't show that one because it's so uncomfortable. And I was like, exactly. That's the point. So this is, I love the giggles. Thank you. That's really nice. It sort of like relieves a little bit of the seriousness that I feel with this work, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I really admire my mother's ability to kind of own herself and who she is, despite her struggles with, still trying to figure that out. And it's definitely not a straight path for her or for any woman, I think, trying to, cope with a changing identity, cope with a changing body and a changing role in life. But she still allows me to make pictures like this and share them. I get permission for this as well. And she can see that this, reveals a lot about our relationship. So it's very meaningful to me. So that's everything I have tonight. Thank you so much.
When your family objected to any of your pictures, what kind of situations were those? Or what were the images like?
I just have an uncle who's pretty unwell and didn't want to be photographed. And I haven't seen him in many years anyway, so I haven't had the chance to photograph him. The ones that he was in were pretty nondescript, if you ask me. He wasn't placed in a moment where he kind of was in unfavorable light, but so it was his own thing, and that's fine. Yeah, but luckily for me, that hasn't created like a complication in terms of making the work. My mother hates every picture, but she lets me do it anyway. I show her one, she's like, fine. So I really appreciate that. Yeah.
So I know your pictures are mostly candid, correct? So I guess I'm just curious on how did you get a lot of the pictures where, I guess it seemed like it was flipped, you are the bigger screen on the, especially with these. And then also the one where you are breastfeeding and peeing, which is I really enjoy that picture. How are you able to
Yeah. Self-portraiture in a photo is pretty simple because of things like self-timers and cable releases, but I'm over all that and I just have someone else press the button. So yeah, and I have no qualms about that. I own the picture. Whoever pressed the shutter does not own the image. And in photography, there's often a lot of debate about that, and I'm like, F it. So I would set it up, in that case, in the bathroom. I actually had my sister sit in for me, and then I set it up, and then I go in, and then I had her press the button. Yeah. Or I'll something will be happening, and I'll have my husband take a bunch of shots. I'll tell him where to go and what to do, and then I'll review them and say okay, no, do it again, but stand here. Yeah. I actually got that question a lot after this kind of made the online rounds. Yeah. It made people think I didn't take them. They were like, she didn't do that. So, yeah.
Two questions. One is the idea of the third person, you being that other person in the room, and how you inhabit that space, even though you have the camera. And the other question is in reference to your the uniqueness of your family and the fact that you have a Midwest family, and you have this West Coast family, and the idea of the multiracial aspect of it and how that plays into your work. And are they ever together?
I always hated being in front of the camera. Hated having my picture taken. I think for a lot of photographers, it's also a way to hide and protect ourselves behind this device where you can't even see our face. So I'd never made self-portraits. I attempted a few times throughout the years with the Family Pictures Project, but I just hated it. And it wasn't until I had my kid that I was like, okay, it's really about me now. This is another place I want to take it. But I'm always in them because it's my viewpoint, it's my choice about our experience that this is the moment that I'm going to share, and the way I'm going to stand and the angle I'm going to choose. So I feel like I'm always in the pictures anyway, yeah. And then do the families come together? They do, logistically, but I haven't made photos about it. It happens very rarely, because my husband's family is they're really in LA most of the time, and yeah, we don't get out there much, but our mothers get along really well, if you were wondering. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to, but you know, like that image of the kitchen. I think there are aesthetics that are, you know, similar and shared across these very different experiences. So I think those are the points where they come together. But I haven't actually made images of like when our families are together, which was basically just our wedding. I don't even know what happened that day, so. Good questions. And the question of like a mixed race family is something that I grapple with all the time. Obviously, race is a conversation in the world every day, in our home every day, how we deal with what our daughter's gonna face. Recently, an extremely liberal friend of mine texted me and said she was so excited about her daughter's school because her best friend was a dark-skinned black girl there. And I'm still dealing with like how upset that's made me. It gets into all the questions of like, what is blackness? How black is black? And this is what my husband's artwork has also dealt with as well. But these things happen, and I'm like, this is just the beginning of what my daughter's life is going to be, and I'm trying to kind of temper that. But I do want to make some work that explores like really what skin tone counts and what's become kind of what is a racial identity in our family across this kind of gradation. And we're going to have another kid, and he might look entirely different. And how are people going to treat him? So it's always on our minds for sure.
I guess I'm curious when if you think about different audiences for your work, or what your thoughts are on that, because a lot of it is so personal, but if you're also making prints or showing them in gallery or museum settings, I guess, what is your kind of ideal viewer for some of your work?
It's definitely, I guess we would call it like the fine art community in the gallery setting, and I do exhibit the work. It was kind of strange to show it online to such an extent because it reached a lot of people who it reached like hundreds of thousands. The work was published in like 30 languages. So more people have seen it than would ever get to come see it in a physical space, which is really cool. But ultimately, the work is, for me, meant to kind of be an object to look upon in a physical space and get to. It's always so different to stand in front of it, and I think for photography, that question comes up a lot because we see it online and we're like, oh, I got it, but it's so different to stand in front of a print, like Mark brought up, then to just view it on the screen, as opposed to screen-based work that's intended to be viewed that way. But yeah, thank you.
But in the case of my grandmother and aunts and mother, they all had copies that they passed around of Our Bodies, Ourselves. And I remember hearing them discussing it and trying to sort out that kind of generational shift and being in feminism and trying to sort it out because it was rather confusing. And that particular book in my case was kind of my introduction to female anatomy when I was probably about 10. So, I mean, it was an interesting thing. Many of them resonate in a very peculiar way. One other thing is that in the case of expressing breast milk and whatnot, my wife went back to work, and then I cared for the first two. And I remember a situation where I was the one sitting on the toilet with frozen breast milk and a howling baby. It was a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not nearly as interesting as yours.
Well, I don't think it's as interesting a nightmare, but I would say worse than what we go through in many ways. I mean, my husband was just, you're useless. Like, I think that the non-nursing person feels this uselessness that's just, there's no solution to it. And you're not good enough, and you're not gonna be, so just get the hell out of here.
I'm just curious about your expectation to your audiences, because I feel a lot of intimacy in it. And even though I'm from different culture and different race, I can feel some sort of like intimacy and the womanhood in it. I think that's the kind of the language here, universal language here. But somehow I'm curious about like, if do you want to like invite audience to your bond or like engagement, or do you want audience to like be objective and stand back from it?
I think the most exciting thing for me is when a viewer something is triggered in them by looking at the work. Like, my mother had the same shirt or whatever, or we lived in a similar house but in a totally different state or something like that. Or just this reminds me of my own experience with my family, and that's, you know, either wonderful or upsetting, or just the fact that it can kind of trigger a response and get people thinking is what, you know, drives me to make the work, and that's really exciting for me. So, yeah. I was going to say something else, but I just lost my train of thought.
So you say you want to trigger a response. Does that mean that you're open and you have the courage to whatever is gonna come? You know, like everybody started talking about that picture of breastfeeding, or for example, this one that can like also, I don't know, it can say so many things as well. Like, you know, like we're listening to you, but like if I didn't know you and I saw that picture, maybe I could think something totally different, you know? So you're open to...
You have to be. I mean, we don't own our art. We don't, right? We make it, we put it out in the world, and everyone's gonna have their own view of it, and you can't control that, you can't change it, and you can't stand here and talk about your work most of the time. It's rare that I get to do this to this extent. So really, you have to, I think all artists have to be open to whatever it is, and people having a negative response or a critical response, or responding in a way that I feel like totally misses the mark. Like, that's not what it's about at all. But if it makes somebody uncomfortable and think that we have some kind of like sexual relationship or something like that, fine, that's you. That's you know, and that's interesting too, because I think that's the beauty of art, you know, as a whole kind of part of the world and a way of thinking and living in the world, is that it causes every person in this room to feel something differently.
Why are there not many pictures of your husband? Only because, yeah, like you know, like I see all these pictures and I can get a little taste of your life, right? But like your husband is a big part of your life as well. You just haven't made like a group of photos that have to do with that, and you're just concentrated in this, or?
He's great. I love him, but. And he's my best friend, and we spend a lot of time together. But in terms of an artistic inquiry, I'm really interested in matriarchal bonds and women's lives and women's identities, and women's voices. So, yeah. And you can learn a lot about him through his work, so I think he's good.
Hey, so you started with medium format photography and kind of a very traditional sort of print to book or print on the wall type way of creating photographs. How did that sort of shift to digital, specifically even just like screenshots with your computer? How did that, or with a phone, how did that sort of change your relationship to the work? Do you feel it made it more intimate, less intimate? Was it exciting? Was it, was it like, I don't know, like
yeah, that's
kind
a
of
good
new
question.
media, like I think it's like is an exciting thing as a photographer,
Yeah.
particularly.
What's exciting for me is that I can do things that I couldn't really do before. And I can make images when I'm walking to work in the morning. I'm not someone who has a lot of time. So, I don't get to spend 3 days a week in the studio or whatever, or travel every couple months to photograph these folks. So it's exciting that these sort of shifts have allowed me to let my practice evolve and keep making work. But I miss the experience of shooting film. It's very different. You load this thing like it's, for photographers, it's like our only kind of tactile experience, and so I miss that kind of like engagement with the physical that I think a lot of other media get to engage in a certain way. So I miss that. I think I make different pictures digitally. It's definitely a faster kind of way of working, and then more editing later, and yeah, so I think there's upsides and downsides to both. Yeah, but it's definitely different. It feels like different images for me. Absolutely, yeah.
So I'll ask what might be the last question. Aranza, do you have a follow-up? Okay. So I'll ask the second to last question. Well, first is just an observation. I was thinking about how your work is so not cool. And I don't mean that it's like unhip. What I mean is it's really warm. I mean, it doesn't, cool. When I think of cool, it's like taking this position of distance or ironic remove. Like in jazz, there was the cool birth of the cool, like cool jazz, which is not so immediate, which is more like taking this like DL attitude. And so that's just sort of a comment, like that your work has this tremendous immediacy and intimacy and honesty and candor, and I don't know. So I have just a very positively strong reaction. It's just amazing, amazing work. And I also think you're kind of a great role model in a way, because so many people find like having kids, especially women, because the burden usually falls more heavily on them than the dads, and having a full-time job basically shuts off their artistic practice, often for a period of a couple decades. And for you, you found a way to keep making work and making strong work through all that. But I guess so what I'm asking is, so you have a job at an art school, and your husband's an artist, but do you have like an artistic peer group and community that supports you as well? That's really my question, is like, kind of how do you do it? You've shown how you make the work, but there's this whole other side to it too, which is how you sustain yourself creatively.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you also. How I've done that has changed so much over the years. After undergrad, I moved from Boston to New York and didn't really know anybody, and so that had its own challenges of like finding a community to keep up that critique and that conversation with. So I would join critique groups, which I still do now sometimes, but less so because I feel like I don't really need crit so much as just like a community. And then I went to get my MFA because I was missing the photo conversation. And I had a lot of friends who are artists, but weren't photographers, and were kind of missing that historical piece that I wanted to talk about. So went back there to kind of expand my community that way. And I would say that, unfortunately, the faculty there were the people who have stayed with me less than the students. A lot of those students didn't continue an art practice, so that was kind of like a bummer, because that was the point of the MFA. But then since having a kid, it's totally shifted things. Like the people I can spend time with in my life are different. The people who, I mean, I've lost friends who just was like, you don't have time for me anymore, like we're done. So it's been a lot of kind of like rejiggering of circles and communities, and there are a lot of good groups out there that I've joined for parenting artists. And I have to say, like, just being part of the SVA community has been incredible. I've made a lot of artist friends through the MFA programs here. I teach in a couple programs, and I'm still in touch with those students. So my students have become my colleagues over the years, which is really wonderful. So I think that's a big part of it too.
How do you choose your images? Because, I mean, you have a lot of Skype conversations, and I bet that you take a bunch of screenshots. Or like, do you take the screenshot that you're thinking about the picture? How do you choose the ones that you want to show?
Editing is so hard. Editing is really, really tough, and I would say like the best photographers bring someone else in to do that for them. And so I sometimes will show them to others, because sometimes I have an attachment to a picture that means a lot to me personally, but for others it's like, it's just not kind of getting past the point where it's going to read something else to others. So sometimes I need to bounce it off other people. That's true for any of these series or different ways of working. If I'm shooting like the screenshots, then I'm just shooting everything I can. It's hard to compose really in that setting, so I'll try to do that as well. But if it's like my daughter, you can't. Photographing kids is the hardest thing in the world. So if it's like my mother or my sister, then I can say, hold for a second, and my sister's amazing at it. My mom will then immediately move and look like this, you know. So you figure out different ways of working with different people. But you know, then you know, editing these iPhone pictures is kind of the same as like me looking at my contact sheet of medium format images, which is some are just barely off and didn't quite get like that perfect moment that conveys everything that I needed to. And I usually I have a rule of like one image from a particular event or scene, so as not to like create too much repetition.
So it has to do more with aesthetics than feelings?
It's both. Yeah, okay. I think that one informs the other, or they inform each other. Yeah, so it is a matter of both, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.